Welcome to the Westside Barbell podcast. Today's guest is Garry Benford. Garry, a pleasure to have you here. We try to start off these podcasts from the start. And where did you first hear about Westside Barbell?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. I moved to Columbus in 1979, June of 79. I'm from Pennsylvania. I went to Slippery Rock University. That's where I first started powerlifting in college. And so I moved here. I accepted a position as the fitness director of the YMCA downtown. This is in June of 79. And I had been there probably a few weeks, and I met one of the members working out in the weight room one day. I think it's Doug Fleming. And we started talking and this and that. And I've been training for a couple months there at the Y because there was a weight room. And Doug says, "Oh, we got to get over to Doug Heath's house. I work out over there." And I said, "Well, who's Doug Heath?" You know, I had just moved here. I didn't know a soul when I came to Columbus, not one person. So when I went over to Doug's house over off of Morse Road and met Doug and worked out in his basement a few times. And after doing that, Doug says, "I got to take you over to Louie's." And I said, "Well, who's Louie?" You know, and Louie Simmons. And I thought, oh, I remember him from the old Powerlifting USA magazines I used to get in college, you know.
Yeah.
So one day, you know, this was probably around January of 1980. So we're talking 42 years ago, I guess. I walked into the garage at 590 Larcomb. And it was just a old school, barbaric garage, no floor, no heat, no air conditioning, a couple dogs, Nitro being one, Nikki was the other one. And I started lifting there, and I met Lou, and that's where everything changed for me. That's where I got better. You know, I could probably I was squatting and deadlifting around 500 as a 181 and benching around 300, and that's with no gear. We didn't have squat suits and bench shirts. You had a belt.
Yeah.
Some wrist wraps, knee wraps were just coming out. And I remember I squatted with Olympic-style shoes. Well, Louie saw that, and that changed, along with a lot of other things I was doing wrong. And I began, and I went over there, and I really didn't have the qualifications, as most of the lifters had to be there, but Lou let me stay.
Yeah.
And he started mentoring me and teaching me things, along with all the other guys, Gary Sanger, Doug Heath, who I mentioned, Doug Fleming, Jimmy Seitzer, Bill Whitaker, Kevin Akins, Tom Palucci, Randy Gamage. There would be like 10 or 12 of us in there training in that garage in one rack, you know, 3 to 4 times per week. So like on Fridays, I think it was at 4 o'clock, we would squat there. And if you were late, and if there was 315 on the bar, that's what you're taking.
Yeah. Because
Lou didn't let you go back down to start over again. You know, Louie was a heavy crane operator at the time. That's what he did for a living. And he would pull up with his truck out in the garage around 3:30 or so and get out. And I remember the first time I met him, I'm like, holy smokes, this guy's jacked. I mean, he was built and put together, you know, and he was what he was. And I just basically said, yes, sir. I was just happy to be there. And I'm looking around and I'm like, I don't belong here at all physically. You know, when I first started lifting, my first meet was in 1974. I squatted 185, I benched 170, and I didn't know what a deadlift was. They had to show me in the warm-up room. I jackhammered 240 all the way up. I totaled 600 weighing 143. So I was not genetically gifted, but I was determined to get better. And the funny thing was, even prior to all that, when I was a senior in high school, my parents had met with a guidance counselor at high school, and the guidance counselor told my mom and dad that your son's not college material. Don't send him to college. Because I was a marginal student in high school, as a marginal athlete. And I went and I learned how to lift a barbell, and it changed my life.
What was your initial inspiration to get into strength training?
Good question. So in high school, I became a javelin thrower my senior year on the track team. I was pretty good. I finished like 4th in the state.
Yeah.
I could throw the javelin about 175, 180 feet, weighing, 140 some pounds. But I never lifted a weight my whole life until I went to school. And I just started then. I thought, well, if I get stronger, I can throw it farther. And I met some other guys who were discus throwers and shot putters, and they were in the barbell club, and they were lifting too. And for several months, my first semester there, this is the fall of 73, I would walk in and guys would laugh at me every time I walked in. I would get made fun of because I remember when I benched 135, I was so proud to have the 2 plates on there, you know?
Yeah.
I remember the night that I squatted 2 1/4 all by myself, and I was happy to have 4 plates on there.
Yeah.
But that's who I was, and that's how I started. And learning how to lift and the dedication and the perseverance and the focused determination that it took made me study. It made me apply myself. And I got a 2.5 my first semester, and I thought, I can stay here. I can stay in college. I can do this.
Yeah.
And every semester afterwards, I made the dean's list. And I graduated cum laude, graduate school, got a master's degree, graduate assistant, graduated summa cum laude. All because I learned how to lift a barbell. Changed my life.
That's amazing. Before you heard or got introduced to Westside Barbell, did you have any other role model that you looked up to that was in the industry?
Yeah, at the time, being from Pennsylvania, there was two great lifters at the time that mentored me back then. A guy named Jack Welch, and he was with the Ambridge VFW Barbell Club. He ended up winning the World IPF Powerlifting Championship in '75 in Birmingham, England. He was a 148. I think he did 496, 352, and 563 as a 148. And again, there's no gear here.
Yeah.
Okay. And another fellow named Joe Orengia, he ran the Presque Isle Powermen's team in Erie, Pennsylvania. And I got to know them because they were really good lifters for that time, because again, there's no gear or anything. And I learned how to run meets at Slippery Rock. The first meet I ever ran was in a hallway of a dormitory. You know, I was just kind of learning as I went. And then I eventually started running them into the East-West Gymnasium and in the field house. And I got known for running really good meets. And these guys would come and compete in my contest, mostly guys from Pennsylvania who were lifters there. And then Jack and Joe became friends of mine. And
what made you get into wanting to start powerlifting meets? Was it there was a lack of them?
Yeah, pretty much. I became president of the Barbell Club my second year there. All 5 years I was president of the weightlifting club. And I had been to a few meets, and I thought, why don't we have a meet here at school?
Yeah.
You know, because there were other colleges in Pennsylvania, like Penn State and Villanova and Pitt and so forth, that had guys lifting too. So I created a state collegiate championship, and they came to Slippery Rock to do it. And they had another event called the Allegheny Mountain Association Junior and Senior National Championships, and I ran that a couple times. And then just some open meets and so forth, and a couple bench meets. And I was doing it as much for the guys on my lifting team as I was just for people in general. My second year in grad school there, I took 16 guys to Pensacola, Florida, in 2 Winnebago vans to compete in the nationals. This was the 4th year I'd went to the collegiate nationals. We lost the national championship by 1 point to the University of Texas. My 114-pounder bombed out. Had he just benched the bar, we would have got 4 points. We could have won it ourselves, and we lost. So here we drive. We're coming back. Everybody's pissed off. Nobody's got any money. Everybody's starving. Everybody wants to go home. And one of the vans breaks down in Alabama. Now 16 guys crawl into one Winnebago. That was the trip from hell. I will never, ever drive to Florida again. And we drove all the way back. And that's kind of how it ended there for me before I moved out here.
Can you explain what the atmosphere felt in that garage?
Well, you know, it was pretty Spartan, but, you know, Louie was everything. He just was the energy that made everything go. And we were all individuals, and we all had different personalities. You know, you had someone like Gary Sanger, who was a college professor in mathematics. Yeah. And then we had like Matt Dimmel, who was a maniac, you know, but he and I were good friends. That's just the way Matt was, you know. I got along with him fine and everything. And so everybody had different personalities, and we just figured out a way to get along with different weight classes. You know, we would have a power rack. There's no jack racks then. So you'd have to change manually the pins. So a shorter person, a taller person. Tom Palucci's a taller guy. Kevin Akins was 6'6", a shot putter at Ohio State. You know, he had to change the racks for him. And benching was the same way. I remember in the wintertime, we would go in there and bench, and you know, he had this little gas propane heater in the corner, and we would have gloves on benching because it was so cold. Yeah. You know? But that's where we all lifted, because the environment made the difference. And Lou was always, back then, he was always coming up with something. Yeah. You would go in and you're going, okay, we're doing reverse hypers. What is that? And he would show us how to do the reverse hyper. And we were laughing because it looked so goofy at the time. And we didn't have a machine because he hadn't invented it yet. So we would manually tie 25-pound plates around our ankles with a utility belt, and someone would lift you up over a couple padded sit-up boards on the rack, and you would manually do your reverse hypers. And we did those for 10 years like that. We do high box and milk carton squats, and we first started dragging weights out in the alley behind his house. You know, you see all these cars pull up in the alley behind 590 Larcomb, and all these guys, all of us, walking back and forth in the alley dragging weights. And I wonder what the neighbors thought, you know. It was just a crazy, crazy place in that regard. But everybody got better, you know, and everybody supported each other, and we went and competed together in meets. And you know, at that time, Westside Barbell didn't exist, the name.
Yeah.
There was a bunch of lifters in Cleveland called from Black's Health World. John Black, Jack Sedaris, John Florio, Steve Wilson, Dave Wolber, just a bunch of guys. And we were like Black's Health World South. So we would wear the shirts and we would go to meets and all of us would compete together. And it wasn't until the late 80s into the early 90s, and I don't remember when, that Louie came up with Westside Barbell. And then he opened a commercial gym, which he hated because he's not a commercial gym guy. And then there was another one. And then we were over at Georgesville Road. That's what I remember the most. And, now here. And people just came and went. It was a core of guys, but people were always coming in. Somebody would show up. And, my first wife, Susie, I had met her at the Y. She was taking a fitness class, and I started her weight training. She had never lifted a weight either. Yeah. And she still holds all the records here at the 97-pound class. And so I took her to lose. I brought Mariah Liggett, who we dated in college, and I brought her to lose. Laura Dodd, who was the premier 165-pounder in the world for women. She was a police officer, worked out at the Y. I brought her to the garage. And one more girl, Sue Meany, was a lifeguard at the Y, and I brought her over to lose too. So I had a lot of women that I had influenced to come over to Westside to help build a women's team, along with Doris.
Which became one of the most successful women's team of all time.
Yes, it did. And Susie and Doris were friends because Susie was a 97-pounder. I mean, how many women weigh 100 pounds? Yeah. And Doris was 105, and I can remember, a funny story, I can remember they're cutting weight in a sauna, and I said, Lou, have you seen Doris? He goes, yeah, I just saw her. This was at a meet. I think we were up in Canton someplace. I just saw there's a priest walking behind her right now. So it's just like, if she's going to survive the weight loss. But yeah, that became a pretty good women's lifting team. Later on, there was Debbie Sorensen, who came at 181. And years after that, Amy Weisberger and so forth. So that's kind of how all that started. I was kind of an impetus there, not to toot my own horn, but I brought kind of the first wave of women into the garage.
Do you think that was one of the start of where people realized that the system was universal, could work for men and for women?
I think so. We would lift on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, and the girls were there Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And he trained them the same way that we trained. Most of them needed, all of them needed his guidance. And we all know who Lou was and who is. His energy level, it's just unmatched. You'll never meet anybody remotely like him, ever.
No. Did you, from day one meeting him, did you realize, this is somebody different, this is somebody special?
Yeah. I mean, I was just lucky.
Yeah.
I kind of fell out of the sky and showed up there one day. And had I not met the couple people that I mentioned, I would have never got to where I was in lifting. I still compete today, and that never would have happened. He was the impetus behind everything for me.
How were you able to sustain that relationship, and what role did you feel you played amongst the lifters, amongst the gym at that time?
My if you want to call it notoriety, wasn't as a lifter, even though I was an elite level lifter. I was a terrific meet promoter, and I say that proudly.
Yeah.
I was the meet director for 9 YMCA national championships, 2 senior national championships, and 2 world championships, plus 6 Ohio State bench meets. My whole thing in running a meet was I wanted you to come to my event and never have been to a better meet in your life.
Yeah.
So, for example, by the end, when I was running the world championships, I would have 5,000 people at the meet. Just imagine, like today, okay? 5,000 people. I had ESPN there, all right? A 4-day event, world championships in 94 and 95. On Thursday, you had a 9 o'clock and a 3 o'clock session. Women, teenagers. Friday, 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock. Saturday, 9-3. Sunday, 9-3. Over 400 lifters. I would have over 200 volunteers working. All of my staff was paid. I paid all my judges. I paid my announcer. I paid all the scorekeepers, the expediter, everybody. All the key people I had paid. I put them up in the rooms. I paid for their food. They worked for me, which is a whole different thing than if you're a volunteer.
Yeah.
Okay. I paid them a stipend to work. And I had a team that was really good at doing this. And I would use them every year, the same guys, the same announcer, people that knew what was going on. So when you would come to compete, in my warm-up room, you would have 3 carpeted platforms with 3 monoliths on it. You would have all new all new squat bars or Texas power bars or elite deadlift bars.
Yeah.
There would be doctors there, massage therapists there, food, drinks, sound system, overhead projector so you could see what's going on, TV so that you could see what's going on, plenty of space, and I would also provide loaders in the warm-up room for you so you didn't have to load anything. I only let one person in per lifter, and I had police at the door to make sure that nobody else piled in. You know, you go to a meet today and there's like 5 guys in there trying to help one guy put on a bench shirt. It's ridiculous. Everybody just gets in the way, right? Well, there, if you got one guy, I got the guys back there, they'll load the bar, he can wrap your knees, he can put your shirt on for you, and people came because they loved those conditions because it enabled them to perform. So to answer your question, a long story short, the guys here at Westside loved coming into my meets. First of all, it's right in town.
Yeah.
Sleep in your own bed, get up in the morning and go weigh in and go home after that. And 2, you never have better conditions to lift in your life. I had met a gentleman, you know, I was probably 10, 15 years into it, named Jim Sutherland. He was working for Universal Fitness Equipment out in Iowa, and he built me a computerized lifting platform. So the racks for the squat came out of the floor. It's a platform. They come out of the floor, they go in, they go out, they go up, they go down. So when you weighed in, you would give your rack height, and I would have someone there who would have all your numbers down. They would say, Tom Berry's up, 13 in, and he would set it, and he was ready to go. Okay, there's no man, your loaders have to, nobody's got to do nothing, bars all set and ready to go. And then we would use the same one for the bench. We just put a bench out there, and then they would disappear for the deadlift, just on the floor. It was all done by the computer. So there was no manual lifting, no this, no that. This was before the monoliths came out. You know, years later we used the monolith instead. That's how much I was trying to make things better. You know, I was always thinking, how can I make, if I was in this meet, what would I want? Yeah. What would I want? How could I make it better for all the guys, you know? And I had a party for them afterwards, and people came. And, you know, when I first started running the Y Nationals, I had lifted in one in West Virginia. Louie took all of us down. I think it was in Beckley, West Virginia. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, YMCA Nationals, I work for a YMCA. How does this work? What? And I contacted the national office in Chicago, and there was no knowledge of any such thing that they had approved. So I got the Y to approve me using the name, and I kept it from that point on because I had worked for a Y. Yeah. And I ran it at my downtown Y a couple years, and I ran it at the North Y 4 or 5 years, and it just kept outgrowing itself. Then I went to a Radisson hotel and ran it there a couple times with a bigger venue, and eventually just kept going, you know, at that point. So that was my thing, was running big meets. And at the same time, I was a okay lifter, a good lifter. I was good enough to stay at Lou's and train. I got my elite in 1990, and, you know, that's what I did, you know.
Where did the inspiration come from? Because what you've just said has cleared up so many things, in that I was used to going to the meets from 2011 onwards. So I guess that's my frame of reference. Okay. So when you would talk with Lou or talk with people from the 70s and 80s, they'd talk about the Y Nationals. They would talk, and they'd this grandiose events which I couldn't get my head around, but now it makes so much sense. But what was the inspiration for the continuous growth? Like, did you look at other sports and see what they were doing?
I just wanted it to be the best it could be. You know, we had a magazine then, which we don't have today. It was called Powerlifting USA. It was the Bible of powerlifting. Yeah. Everybody looked forward to their Powerlifting USA magazine, which came out once a month, because there's no internet, there's no social media. That stuff never existed. And I became good friends with Mike Lambert, who owned and published Powerlifting USA magazine. And every year he would come to my meet from California and put it on the cover. So if I ran the meet in December, it was either on the cover in January or February. What a tremendous promo for my events. Yeah. It's on the cover of the magazine. And he would write glowing remarks about it, and people would read it and they go, I want to go to that meet, you know? And it just kept kind of feeding itself. And I've always been a leader in adult fitness all my life. So it was just an intuitive drive that I always had to make anything that I was doing better. Mm-hmm. I was never satisfied with anything. If I did something, I thought, okay, what else can we do? How else can we make this better? You know, I had a scale that was brought in from a feed place, so the guys could weigh themselves 24/7, several days in advance. Guys would come to the hotel like at the Worlds, be 2-3 days early. That scale's always there. You want to go downstairs and get on a scale, you can do that. Just simple things like that, you know, that people wouldn't think about. I had vendors in my around the with a spectator stat. So you can come and buy a booth. And I would sell booths. I probably had 20, 25 booths that you could sell your shirts or your books or your wraps or your smelling or ammonia salts or whatever you wanted. So it was just part of me. I just never satisfied with what I was doing. I was always wanting to make it better. Always wanted to make it better.
How hard was it to get 5,000 people to come to an event?
It just grew over time because of the tenure of me being, having my meets being shown on the cover of that magazine, where eventually it was like, I would try to sell tickets and I would put out ads here and there, and it just happened.
Yeah.
I would advertise in PL USA, but because of the tenure and amount of years that I was doing those huge events, people would just show up. And I remember, meet entry was $50. Today, everybody spends $100 to go to a bench meet.
Yeah.
And to get into the event was $10. $10, okay? It's pretty cheap. Mm-hmm. And I would have a police officer at the door, and I had a couple of my staff sitting there like you would be comp to come in. Of course, Louie would be comp. I had a list of workers and comp people. Yeah. And if you're not on that list, that cop ain't letting you in. Yeah. So I was able to generate a lot of money too. So when I worked for the Y got all that money. It was just part of my job. Yeah. I'm running basketball tournaments and handball leagues and triathlons and all these other events for the Y. And after I left the Y after 12 years, I got in the commercial gym business. Jim Lorimer's son, Bob, and I became business partners. And we owned and operated 9 locations for almost 20 years.
Wow.
We had a couple hundred employees, about 25,000 members. And now that was part of my gym business. I was running big meets for our gym business for exposure. So we were a sponsor, and we got a lot of notoriety and so forth. So I was fortunate because either at the Y or in my gyms, I always had access to people to volunteer. So I might ask you to work the squat lift, for example, 5 guys. You work the 242, 275-pound class, you put on the squat, and you're done. Then I got another 5 guys. Everybody was fresh. Everybody was dressed the same. Yeah. Everybody had a uniform on. It looked professional, So when you try to attract an ESPN, you have to be able to make it look like something on ESPN.
Yeah.
But I always had access to people to be able to pull this stuff off because I would spend $20,000 before I had one entry fee. Wow. Just to provide everything. I remember the first time I ran an event at the Radisson Hotel, I sat in a vacant ballroom for 4.5 hours, sitting there by myself one afternoon, mapping out everything I wanted to see. I was visualizing everything I wanted it to be, how I wanted it to be, where the flags were going to hang, where the lights were going to be, how much square footage did I have. And I just prepped it all in advance. And I wanted that event to be great for all the guys, especially all the guys that came from our gym to compete.
It's just astounding. It's
Thank you.
What was the most, surprising thing you may have learned from putting on these meets that you didn't foresee happening?
Well, I tell you, when I decided to get out, there's a point where you get out, and I had ran the Y Nationals for 9 years, and at the same time, one year I ran the Y Nationals, twice I did, and the Senior Nationals in the same year, and I was getting a little burned out.
Yeah.
And I decided to back off for a while, and I kind of retired from meat production. And there were people who were upset with me because I wasn't doing it anymore, because they had just lost what they loved to do. They were angry at me, not understanding of the situation. It would take me a year to pull one of these events off with everything else I had to do. It just didn't happen. It was a ton of work that went into it, a ton of time, communication, making sure people were where they were supposed to be, et cetera, all the provisions were there. So I was surprised when that happened that, I had angered a lot of people that I thought were friendly to me.
Yeah.
And, a few years later, when the APF and the WPC was created, there was a few world meets that were in different countries that we would go lift in, whether it was in England or Austria, South Africa. I remember Mariah and Ernie, France, talking to me. They wanted me to host it. And I said, okay, it's been 4 years. I think I can still do that. I still got the people to pull it off. And I ran it in 94 and 95. And, but I was a little surprised by that when that happened, with everything that I had put into it, that people would turn somewhat against me because it was almost like I was supposed to do it for them. That's how it got. Yeah. They had expected that. And I'm not trying to be negative towards those people. I'm just trying to, answer your question.
Unless I'm ignorant of meets of that caliber, is there anything that comes close to what you've done in
Today?
Yeah.
No. No, because the sport's so fragmented.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many federations. You know, I'm talking about a time when there was one or two. It was the USPF, and then there was the APF. You know, and my Y National meet was dual sanctioned. So you could be from either federation. I don't care.
Yeah.
Okay? And you could set records for either federation. I don't care. You know? Today, you go to a meet and there's, you know, your girlfriend's there and maybe your grandma shows up and a dog and, you know, it's kind of a mishmash of people. And, you know, I just remember, man, it was so different, you know. And every now and then, you know, I'll see somebody from years back. I'll go, you ever going to run one of those meets again?
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, no, I'm done. You know, I've been there, done that. But, yeah, you don't find that anywhere today.
It's amazing because some of the lifts that are being made now are so astonishing that they're done in the most remote of locations.
Yes.
And I know like the APF is trying to promote and come to make more of a, I'm not sure if a statement, but to put on a good show for more people to see it. But just listening to this, I mean, having something come out of the ground with your height to like, that's just amazing. And now I can see more too is how you and Lou clicked. Mm-hmm. That it just reminds me of stuff. Well, if it wasn't invented, it's phenomenal. Now here's a chance to make something happen. You
know, I'd go into the gym, we'd go into lift one day, and I wanted to ask him something. Say, Louie, here's what I'm thinking about for the meet. What do you think of this? What do you think of this? And he goes, oh yeah. He goes, well, how about this? And I was like, yeah, okay, we can do that. You know, there was no limits for me. I just tried whatever was possible, and it was nice for me. You know, I wasn't an 800-pound squatter or 600-pound bencher. I wasn't one of those guys, but I was that guy.
Yeah.
And I was still accepted by everybody, and that was a big part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would bounce stuff off of him and ask him what he thought or what do you think about this, and you know, we would discuss things, and I just always was, like I said, I was never satisfied with what I did.
What was Louie like as a mentor to you?
Oh man, I mean, everything I know about powerlifting, I know from him. Everything.
Yeah.
You know, and I said, you know, we didn't have speed training and bands and chains until the early mid-90s. I mean, we were like guinea pigs in the garage for those 10, 12-ish, whatever years. But Louie always helped me, always. I mean, you know, and again, I wasn't the guy there. I didn't have the gifts, the physical gifts of other people, but I was willing to try and work hard. And a special moment in my life for me. In 1990, I went to a meet as a 98. I squatted 710, I benched 460, and I pulled 600. I got my elite. At the same time, about a week later, Doug Heath became the first person at 132 to bench 400. This is in 1990. So Louie has us over to the gym, and he presents us with a silver sword.
Oh, wow.
Now, I mean, I have a trophy case at home, and it's...
That's an amazing thing, because anyone who knows Lou knows that's a rare thing for him to do something like that.
It's my most prized possession. Excuse me.
Oh, you're fine. It's as you said, it's a surreal time, and as we said, like Louie, his life is short stories, day by day, and he may have talked to 1 or 20 people on that given day, and everyone has their Louie stories. How important was that group to you? Just say in terms of how your life turned out.
You know, powerlifting was what I did, but it wasn't who I was.
Yeah.
There's a difference. You know, for some people, they get into this and it's their whole life.
Yeah.
You know, they don't have. I've always tried to maintain balance in my life, in my relationships, with my kids, with my family, with my business, with my friends. You know, it was always something that I did, but it wasn't my life. But those guys, I could just switch gears. Like when I would walk into the gym, I could just be there instantly. Yeah. I might be in a meeting someplace regarding a business trying to sponsor this or that for my company or the Y or whatever it was, but I could switch gears real quick and I could get in the mode real fast. You know, like the music, okay, AC/DC, over and over and over. I can tell you the sequence of every song of AC/DC, and even today I hear one of those songs and my mind is in a squat rack on a Friday night over at 590 Larcomb, you know. It's just funny how those things come back to you,
yeah.
You know. And I can remember even too, you know, I would see Lou, years later at these different meets I would be competing in, I had both of my hips replaced, and I've had both of my shoulders replaced. So I got 4 titanium implants. I've had 13 surgeries altogether. I ruptured both triceps, ruptured a bicep, double shoulder scope, hip scope, D scope. I've had open heart surgery to replace a valve in my aorta. Okay. And so I've, paid a price, so to speak, for everything that I've been able to do.
Yeah.
But I went to a meet a few years back. It was out in Newark, and Lou was there, and he yelled over to me, and he goes, "I just want you to know how proud I am that you're still lifting."
Yeah.
I'm 68. I was just in a meet this past year, and still want to go to more meets. I hope I can be around still when I'm in my 70s, because, the nice thing about Masters powerlifting is that it goes into the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Very seldom do you see one of those people. And, since I've turned 55, I've set 36 world records in the bench press in Masters competition in 5 different federations, whether it's the WNPF, the IPA, APF, RPS, or what am I missing? Or some other one, SPF, perhaps. I go and I look and see what's the number, what's the IPA record for 65 to 69, and I go try to find a meet that I can go break a record in, and with my implants, I'm not even supposed to be doing this.
Yeah.
Because I was told you can't load weights on these, but I still do.
Yeah.
I wear a multiply bench shirt to compress the sockets, and I'm still able to survive, so to speak.
Do you like challenges? Is that why you still do it?
Yeah. Yeah, I still get, like I was in the gym this morning at 9 o'clock with my 2 workout partners, and raw squatted 410 for a set of 5 with a safety squat bar. I can't get under a straight bar because I can't externally rotate my hands with my implants. But I still like to challenge myself.
Yeah.
I can't explain it. It's just me.
Yeah. When you met Lou, did you immediately understand that to him, powerlifting was his life?
Oh, yeah.
That everything else was
Oh,
just...
yeah. You got, when you go to the garage, you better be ready. Okay?
Yeah.
Because this is it. The workouts were far more difficult than going to a meet.
Yeah.
Because you had him, there was nothing like even, I used to work out with Bob Coe and Jeff Gritter, 2 great guys who helped me a lot. And Jeff Adams, Gritter. And we would squat together, and he would come in, and here goes the music, and here comes Lou, and it's just like game on, all right?
Yeah.
And I would look down, I'm looking, there's blood all over the floor. I'm like, okay, who's in here this morning? Whose blood's that? And the music would go on, and here some speed training would start, and the chains are clanging, and off away we go. But yeah, you had to realize when he's there, it's all business, because, you can be easily kicked out of there. And I can remember many times where there would be a vote to keep someone or let somebody go, and sometimes there were people I didn't even know because I never saw them. They came in with a different group of people, But yeah, with him, there was never any guesswork with that. It was all business. And, it made the difference.
Yeah.
It made all the difference in the world because, you can never, like I said, you can't duplicate him. It's not possible.
Oh, no. As he get the maximum example of if you want to be truly dedicated to something, here's the cost. Mm-hmm. And to him, it just came so natural.
And all that, he's still the funniest person I've ever met in my life.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. You would just hope that when he would get on a roll or a rant that you were just about finished, because if not, you would be laughing so hard, you'd be crying.
Yeah.
He would get on somebody, me, sometimes other people, but he was such a funny guy. Oh my gosh. Such a sense of humor. Just, always in a positive mood though. That was the one thing. I never would see him cranky or pissed off or this or that. Even when he was working as a heavy crane operator, 8 hours running that crane, hard work, he'd come in there and, man, it was like it never even happened for him. He was always wound up and ready to go.
Did you notice differences throughout the various decades?
Yes.
And just obviously the training progressed, and you were part of the old guard that went through all the maximum. Like there were the maximum years where like we were going all out to where towards the 2000s upwards became the optimal years where injuries doesn't have to be a part of things. But in Lou, did you see a way in when he went from lifter to lifter coach to coach?
Yes.
And did you notice a difference?
Yes, he always wanted to be a great lifter, and he was.
Yeah.
5 elites, different weight classes. But he wanted to be that champion guy, and he was at, 98, 220. That's a tough class.
Yeah.
There's so many good guys. I'd run the Y Nationals. You can come in 10th place and be elite.
Wow.
10th place and be elite, but he always wanted to be a great lifter, and he was up against some tough guys like Larry and Ernie, and just, it was always hard. He was always top 3, he was always there. But as time went along, that subsided. He would start to specialize in some things like the bench or maybe the squat. But then he became fascinated by the acquisition of strength and reading literature and talking to people and over the phone or in person, and started, like I said, I remember he says, "What's my first book? When I write my book, you're going to see it in my book." I never saw a book until a few years later. Then there was like, I don't know, was he got 20 books now or something like
12.
That? Okay, 12. That's 12's enough. The videos and everything and all the seminars, and he just, boy, I wish we would have had access to his knowledge back then, because, it was just all balls to the wall every time we went to the gym to train. And he became a little different in that regard.
Yeah.
In your gym here, he could spread himself amongst 30 people and give everybody equal attention.
Yeah.
Just because he was so into what he did, and I don't care who it was. I remember I'd go in, and we go to work out, and he's got a Green Bay Packer hat on. And then next week, it's a Clemson T-shirt. And I figured, well, the strength coach of Clemson was just here this morning, or the guy from the Packers was just here. And that didn't start till later on as well.
Yeah.
When he became the strength guru.
Yeah.
There was an evolution of him as well, not only just as a lifter, but also as the premier person to talk to about strength training. Because he could, whether it was in track and field, or it was in boxing, or MMA fighting, or powerlifting, weightlifting, there was nothing you can tell him. He knew everything.
It really seemed that his worst days, or athletes' worst days in terms of injuries, we benefited from those mishaps, because that's when information had to be sought after.
Yes.
And that's when you're like, well, if we have to fix this, there's not a machine, we have to invent this machine. And it's because of those mishaps that we get to benefit hugely from that. And I remember and again, this is what 2011, every person that come in is always injured. And I'm like, is this where injured people, but Louie was the last hope for a lot of people.
Yes.
And I'd never seen him fail, because he's seen it over and over and over and over again. And that's what makes this place so special, that it's always been athlete first.
Yes.
It's never been money first. It's never been success first. It's always been, how do we fix your problem?
Yes.
And Louie loved the thrill of problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember he didn't want to talk to any NFL team or combine because it was just too boring. I'm like, how is this this is the gold standard for strength coaches wanting to get in at the time. How is this boring? And then you can just see how his mind worked. It's like, he wanted challenges.
Yes.
When he was training as a lifter, was he always competitive?
Yes.
Like, was that a big part?
Oh, very much so. Oh, yeah, he was driven all the time. Yeah, he was all the time. And he went through some terrible injuries himself, with his spine, and he almost died once.
Yeah.
I remember that very well. And so he personally had adverse effects like many of us. But, there ain't no stopping him. You can take an elephant gun, shoot him, he's still going to come up and squat in that rack that night.
Yeah.
It's just the way he was, But even like you would sit down sometimes with him and you would talk about a problem you were having in a certain lift, and he knew so much. What you had to be able to do was to discern this avalanche of information. I just need one thing or two, not 8. Yeah. I hear everything you're saying, but how do I apply all of that to get it down to 1 or 2?
Yeah.
And I learned to listen to that, and as he was talk, I would go, "Oh, that's there. Yeah, that makes sense," and that, yes, and I would do that, and I would pick it out, because there were so many, and there's lots of ways to be successful in lifting.
Yeah.
A lot of people do it a lot of different ways, right? But the bottom line is results.
Yeah.
There's really not one right way, but learning the conjugate method, learning about speed training and all that, to prevent yourself from being grossly overtrained, to prevent yourself from being injured.
Yeah.
We didn't have that, but he came up with that in later years, to his credit, and that's why you see some of the numbers that you see today.
Yeah.
They're just off the ball. I mean, when I talk to him about it, I'm like, "Louie, how's a guy benching, 1,100 pounds when we lifted? If you did 600 raw, that was impressive."
Yeah.
Or if you could pull 800 off the floor, that was a lot of weight, let alone 900. Guys today squat 100 pounds, and I remember I saw the first 1,000 pound squat what Dave Waddington did over in Zanesville in 1984. I remember when Matt Dimble squatted 10-10. You know, we had our first 1,000 pound squatter. Well, today, I don't know, there's 100 guys that have squatted 1,000.
Yeah.
It's just nuts.
Well, and then you have Hoff, who just sets above the rest.
Yeah, it's just like, what?
It's amazing what it's done for powerlifting, but from my side, the conjugate method, I've never utilized a system that transfers over to skill acquisition better than that for professional athletes. It gives them the maximum opportunity to acquire more skill. So if you're a football player, MMA, whatever your sport discipline is that requires skill, it keeps you healthy and strong enough to learn more.
You know, you would know this better because of the business that you run. I would imagine he's more popular outside of the U.S.
Oh, yeah.
In Europe, you know, Baltic countries, Asia, than he is even here because there's no voice there, you know?
Well, that's what I learned of Louie in college. And I just assumed, as you would, that Ohio State, he must have been probably an in-house. You bring him in every month and he would give you just because he was this big thing overseas. And then you're like, no, it was still rather underground over here, it was baffling. Because I remember when I got an email back was from Doris. And I'm like, that's very strange. His wife is emailing me. Because I thought it was this big, it's like the Wizard of Oz. I thought it was this huge thing.
It's kind of like that.
Yeah, and then you go behind the screen, you're like,
That's a good analogy, yeah.
And, but I've never met a group of more dedicated people in anything. Mm-hmm. I've never seen a person who solved the problems he did in a gym. Like, no matter what the problem, doesn't necessarily mean it was a gym-related problem. Like, people would come to Louie with everything for guidance. And he always said the answer was in these four walls of the gym. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, just completely, I threw out the vast majority of information I learned at college. It taught me, like, what not to do. But then there's the real-life aspect. And again, that's all benefit from you guys. You don't know how far is too far until you get there.
Yes.
And there was a lot of you guys that went way past what too far was. And then minimal was never an option here. So it was either optimal to maximal. And then just by sheer data of numbers alone, we got to optimal training. And powerlifting is the best to find maximal in terms of intensities and weightlifting. But when he started getting more of the football players in, and then he loved fighting, loved boxing, loved MMA.
Yes, he did.
Then you could just see we benefited from that to where the new generation came in. They were already strong, but he's like, well, what's the next challenge?
Right.
And he took all these principles and put them into where we're trying to figure out, like, why is this carrying over so well? Well, because they can learn more skill, and skill trumps vast majority of everything in sports. And he was the first strength coach I ever met that, what are you going to do with these people? He didn't say, I want to make them bigger, faster, stronger. Like, I'm going to make them better at their sport. And like, that's the way he thought, which was kind of contradictory than what most coaches were doing back then.
You know, from a human standpoint, all the people that he has touched in his life, you know, me, the guys I lifted with over all the years, what he gave those people as a human being in terms of their self-worth and a place in life, a meaning of status, to become important, to be viewed as something that they weren't before in a positive way. It's just endless.
Yeah.
All of us were touched in some way, somehow, you know, even though we all came and went, people come and go in any kind of sport. But from a human standpoint, I just think back at everything he's done and all the lives that he's touched and the people that he's affected in a positive way. It's just amazing.
What made that era so special? Like, you had Louie, Larry Pacifico, Ernie Franz. Mm-hmm. You had all these people. God, mine's drawn blanks. George Friend. Mm-hmm. You had
Don Reinhardt.
Yeah, you had all, like, what made this so
special?
It
was, I called it the golden age of powerlifting, from probably 75 to 95-ish to 2000.
Yeah.
And, there was no social media, there was no internet. You had this magazine, and this magazine would show up once a month, and you would just, Mike Lambert came out with what's called the Power Hotline at one point, and I subscribed to it. I just remember I would get it, and as soon as I got it, I'd give it to Lou. And he was so excited to get it because he wanted to read about everybody who was on the Power Hotline because it came out every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So he was ahead of everybody else, right? He would take the hotline, like, here, Lou's a hotline. I got it, and I would give it to him all the time. But it was just a golden age, and it's where it just took off then. Powerlifting started in the mid-'60s over at York Barbell. Bob Hoffman was sponsoring a powerlifting team, and the first lift in the meet actually was a bench press, and then you squatted, and then you deadlift, and that's what the order was. No gear, no this, no that, rickety squat racks, a rickety bench. But that's what it all started, and you just had a couple federations. Now you imagine, you got one federation at the time, the USPF, then it became two, the APF, because of the drug testing.
Yeah.
Right? But you got even more lifters because of that. So now you got all these people, and you go to a meet, it's like a who's who.
Yeah.
Like my YMCA national meet, like, holy smokes, look who's here. Who's not elite? Everybody's elite. You had to be elite to lift in that meet.
Yeah.
It wasn't like you can come and be your first contest. You had to qualify to go. And it was like superstars of the sport.
And everyone would talk.
Yes.
Like phone calls was just a norm. Like sharing, like the sharing of ideas. He would talk about George Crawford and what he learned from him. And I think a lot of that is lost potentially because you think you can learn from social media, but like obviously Lou freaking hated technology. It wasn't him, but a phone call or meeting, that interaction, he would just learn so much from every visitor. Was an opportunity for him to learn. They come to learn from him, and he'd end up learning way more from them.
Because see, Lou always knew what he knew.
Yeah,
he knows what he knows. What do you know? Well, tell me about you. And he would pick up something and go, never thought about that. And he would try to take that nugget and apply it into all the other stuff that is this encyclopedia of information that he knows, and just add that to the repertoire. Everybody was a source of information.
What were some of the most interesting things you have seen, like in that gym, or the stuff came through? There has been a lot.
I saw the first 1,000-pound squat. I saw the first 700-pound bench.
Who was that?
It was my mind just went blank. In Hawaii, Tedar City.
Okay.
Yeah, in a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah. I went to a meet one time. I was at USPF seniors watching. There was a lifter named Gene Bell, 181-pounder. He was a sergeant in the Marine Corps. Black guy, 5'4", built like a brick shit house. I think I can't remember exactly, but he opened with what he thought was 705 in the squat. And it was misloaded by 90 pounds. He squatted 804. I think I'm correct with this number. Not knowing it was 804 on his opening attempt, and stood up with it. What?
That's amazing.
And he had never squatted. I don't think he's ever did it in his life, and he did it on his opener, thinking it was 705. I remember over in Dayton when Larry ran the seniors one year, and what was his name? The guy squatted over 1,000, walking the weight out 3 times. Oh, help me, please. So I'll get it here in a second. So he calls for 1,000-pound squat. And it was like 1020 or so. And he comes out and he goes down, and it goes over his head. The bar goes over his head and knocks him out. So they pick him up, and there's plates and everything, boom, going all over the place. There's just jack racks at the time. There's no
Lee Moran?
Lee Moran, thank you so much. And so he wants to try it again. So he tries again, he walks it out, and they don't have the collars tightened all the way. Boom, there goes the 100-pound plates. They go flying off the bar. It's like a bomb goes off on the platform. Boom, bang, smash, down, boom, crash. He goes down. It's like fireworks, and they pick him back up, and the place is like, oh my gosh, and all of a sudden the announcer goes, if you want him to, Lee says if he'll try it again if you want him to. Well, the place goes crazy, okay? And he had a big venue there with several thousand people. And Lee Moran goes out, and he goes down with it and stands right up with it, and the place just goes crazy. It was just insane to see someone basically die on the platform attempting a lift twice and then come back and make it.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I remember years ago, I used to run the bench meet for the Arnold, and we had invited a lifter who got the gold medal in the Paralympics. he didn't basically have legs. So he would arm walk his way out to the bench, and we would get him up on the bench, and we'd have to strap him down so he wouldn't tip off to the side. And he's benching like 450 with half of a body, you know, and the place just goes nuts.
Yeah.
To see stuff like that, you know. I mean, there's things I haven't witnessed here, but back in my day, you know, in the 80s and 90s, Laura Dodd was the premier 165-pounder in the world.
Yeah.
573 squat, 551 deadlift, you know, and then you have, comes along, help me again, who shatters all of her records.
Amy?
Not Amy, but...
Laura Phelps?
Laura Phelps, thank you. I can't remember people here. A 765 squat. I'm like, what? That's more than I ever squatted as a 98 as a man. You know, a 540 bench. My best was 500. It's just nuts. To see people do certain things like that, it's just astounding. I mentioned Doug Heath's bench, 400 at 132, 32 years ago, you know, single ply shirt. Another tremendous lift. You know, watching Lamar Gant deadlift at 132 with a terrible scoliosis to pull 661 off the floor weighing 132. We had a guy at one of my senior national meets named Garry Benford, and he was 6'8". He was a big guy. He used to play basketball. And at the time, I think the world record in the deadlift was a little over 9. He pulls 935. You know, and the place erupts, of course, when you see those kind of numbers by people. But today, you know, some of those things are just kind of commonplace because, you know, genetically, it's like swimmers and runners. You're like at a swim meet. You know, you go to the Olympics, like Mark Spitz, what he did 50 years ago, he wouldn't even make a high school team almost with his times, you know. And lifting's the same way. The numbers just keep going up. Every now and then I'll get on Powerlifting Watch and I'll see some guy squat over 1,000 raw and pull 900 raw and bench 600 raw. And it's just like, wow.
I think people have a hard time comprehending what heavyweight is.
Yes.
Strongman does a great job of using objects to go, well, I know a car is heavy, or I know that a tree log is heavy, or a ship pulling that. It's easy for someone to understand that. But when someone lifts a heavy weight, unless you're around it, like 1,000 pounds is no joke.
No, right.
Like, it's just insane.
It's a number.
Or a 500, hell, anything over 400 pounds and a bench raw is just ridiculous. But everyone's just like, oh, it is what it is. I'm like, not until you actually feel heavyweight. And it's very hard to portray that feeling when a lot of people, unless you're interested, don't understand what they're watching.
I remember one of my Y National meets in the mid-'80s, there was a lifter named Rick Weil, 165-pounder, no gear, no belt, no wrist straps, no nothing. In fact, his shoes were slippers. He comes out and benches 551. Now, this is 35 years ago. At 165, 181, I can't remember, he was one or the other. Nothing, just no emotion, just lays down and presses the weight. You know, no arch, no excessive arch, no short arms, nothing to give him leverage advantage, just boom, strength.
Do you think everyone's just so much more consistent with training? Or like it's just amazing to hear.
I just think it's just genetics. People are bigger today. You know, you look at, you know, I got my 50-year high school reunion this summer, okay? When I was in high school, if you weighed 200 pounds, you were a tackle. You're not a tackle today if you weigh 200 pounds.
Yeah.
You're maybe a safety.
Yeah.
You know, you're not even a running back. It's just genetically, people are just so big, and they just grow stronger and become faster and throw objects farther and jump higher. And look at basketball players. I mean, look at the evolution of how they looked. If you watch a video back in the 60s, it's just a bunch of tall guys.
Yeah.
You know, you look at the guys today, they're built, they're put together, you know, because they do something year round, like weight training.
Yeah.
When I first started in the 70s, I was hired as a school's first strength and conditioning coach, and I had coaches didn't want to send athletes to me because it'll make you slow and muscle bound. Right? That myth that exists, that squats are bad for your knees, and if you lift weights when you get older, all that muscle turns into fat. You know, all these crazy things. Well, today it's mainstream. Every school, every sport does weight training. It's all mainstream.
Alvin Roy in 1976, I believe, was the first professional strength coach.
With the Oakland Raiders.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I think it's very interesting that you had the academics. So you had Kramer, Terry Todd, you had everyone this side, and you had Westside Barbell, who was really starting the garage gym scene back in the 70s. And if you look at it now, it's so popular that people wouldn't even second guess to put a gym in your garage. Well, that you guys were all doing this back in the 70s.
You know, CrossFit. Look at CrossFit.
Yeah.
It's just an empty box someplace with some free weights.
Yeah. It's just amazing how, and it's so new, people forget that before we have all the battle of the methods, who trains the best, and well, they forget that it was the culture that created the consistency that made these methods possible. And you'd look at all these different people who are so strong. They all didn't train the same, but what they all did was shared information. And Louie was the one who tried to get as much information as possible. And he's like, well, why wouldn't I do all the best things they're doing and avoid the stuff that doesn't work? And like that simple philosophy, look what that evolved into the system of training.
Yes.
What's one of your most memorable Louie stories?
I remember when he almost died. You know, that was a harrowing experience. And he came back with a trach in his throat. And I remember Chuck was there when helped him train, didn't put no pity party on him, you know, as you would think, right?
Yeah.
Knowing Chuck, right? I mean, most intense lifter I ever trained with, to me, in my time, him and Doug were the two greatest lifters ever to come out of Westside Barbell, by far. But that was a scary time when that happened.
Was that the dentist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, and the anesthesia, what it caused, and all the stuff that went along with it. And, I mean, you know, we almost lost him years ago. You know, I can think of a lot of funny stories, but I can't think of a momentous thing. I just...
Even some of the funny stories, anything that...
That was one. So one time, I know Bill Whitaker was here a short while ago, and I hadn't seen Bill in a long time. And so in Powerlifting USA, there was a top 100 list that came out every month. And you were looked forward to that because once a year you could see how you would compare to other people.
Yeah.
And Bill was at 165, and he could squat and deadlift about 600. And I don't know, he was close to a 300 bench. You know, he didn't have a great bench compared to a squat and deadlift. So it's on the wall, okay, and this is the garage here, okay? So he's looking, and he goes, Lou, I don't see my bench here. And Lou comes over, and he goes, wait a minute. And Lou walks across the garage onto the other wall and goes, Bill, it's over here. That was Louie, right?
Yeah.
We were at a meet once up in Canton, the Women's Nationals, and Sue Meany was one of the women I got started in lifting. And, you know, she was a heavyweight. And her and Lou are walking down the hall, and Susie and I are standing there, and she's got these gray sweats on. And he just walks up, and he just says, she looks good in gray. You know, and I'm trying not to laugh to embarrass her or anything, but it was just such a funny thing, you know? It's just these little one-liners he would come up with every now and then, you know, different things. And we had another guy, Randy Gamage was a 220-pound lifter and a very explosive bencher, and he was gaining weight. And he said to Lou one day, he says, Lou, my waist is getting so big. And Louie says, we always say, Randy, you're the biggest waist we ever saw. You know, bump.
Yeah.
Right? It was just like that with him all the time, you know, and he's just a funny guy. Just a funny guy.
You said Chuck and Doug were the most...
To me.
Yeah. What made them that way? What made them so special?
They could go to big meets outside of here and perform.
Yeah.
Chicago, Texas, California, wherever, you know. And I prided myself on that too as a master lifter. I was able to go, I won 5 national meets that way. I could perform too. And some guys just couldn't do it. They didn't have the mental fortitude to be outside of their realm, to not have their guys around them.
Yeah.
Chuck and Doug, not those two, man. I mean, 2 best lifters I ever saw come out of Westside. That's just me.
Yeah.
You know. And Chuck's by far, I had to squat with him a couple times, Chuck. I thought I was going to die. Louie paired me up with Chuck. He paired me up with George Halbert once on the bench. All we did was use bands one day. I'm like, okay, George is benching 700 at 181, all right? I can bench 450, 460. Like, what am I doing on the bench with him? That's how Lou did things, you know? Yeah. And I'm in the monolift with Chuck, and we got, like, I think 4 1/4 on with 80 pounds of chains, and he's standing up with, like, 135. Boom. Boom, boom. You know, and I'm standing up with it, but it wasn't like that. And I know sooner I'm out of the rack than he's done. He goes, you're up. And I'm like, Lou says 45 seconds. He goes, no, you're up. Hard. I'm thinking I'm going to die today, but I've always wanted to die on a platform, so maybe this is it. You know? Yeah, Chuck was just off the wall intense, man. There's no one I've ever seen like that.
What are some of the biggest mistakes you see people making when it comes to training?
Well, technique is one. You know, you walk into any place, any fitness center, quote unquote, even places where high school weight rooms, whatever. The shoes that they wear, you know, they got whatever athletic shoes on. When we know the Chuck Taylors is what you're supposed to wear, we all had Chuck Taylors, right? The stance that they take, narrow stance squats, knees going forward over their ankles, you know, not sitting their butt back, not using a wide stance. The bench press, not setting their lats before they press, tucking their elbows as they press, elbows, you know, external rotation of the elbows. Not being prepared physically to do what they're trying to do, not spending the time necessary to build the base to push the number that they want to push.
Yeah.
You know, always maxing out all the time and wonder why their shoulder hurts so bad, and you know, benching and then doing inclines and then doing dumbbells and doing all the shoulder pressing and wonder why their AC joint hurts. You know, those type of things. You know, and you just see them over and over and over again. It's common mistakes.
Do you have any tips for people who are getting into weight training?
Well, it takes time. You know, learn good form and technique first. You probably hear that all the time. People saying something they already know. Stay consistent. Consistency. You know, I kept track of this. This sounds weird. It probably doesn't sound possible. But I started lifting in the fall of '73. And in my life, I have missed this many workouts.
Wow.
7. 1, 2, 3, 4 joint replacements. 5, 6, 7. I went 30 years before I missed one. That was me. You know, and I got that from him.
Yeah.
You know, no, if I had to go to a seminar or a meeting on a Friday or something, I couldn't get to, I would do it on a Thursday, but I always got it in. And people just don't stay consistent enough. You know, they want it yesterday. Someone will go, well, if I went to a meet, I want to go to a bench meet. What does it take to win? You want a trophy? Yeah. Well, go buy one if you want one. You know, if you want a trophy, go buy one. Go earn it first. Don't worry about that. It's like people that want to run, they want to win the 10K or win the marathon the first race. You know, just get in your first race, get in your first meet, establish some numbers, see where you're at. Now you have some baseline to go with.
Yeah.
You know, everybody wants it now. To work for it, it's just not appealing.
Yeah.
You know, it's just not appealing to people. They just want it now. They're looking for a quick, easy fix, and it's just old school works. Barbells, dumbbells, it never goes out of style. It's not called anything, but it sure as damn well works when you use it right.
Simplicity is key.
That's right.
To you, is lifting it's just like breathing?
Yeah.
It's just part of your life?
Yeah.
I wish more people viewed it that way, because I think it's a lot easier for people to comprehend that a workout isn't just for the sake of vanity, more so for mental and physical health. There's
nothing better.
Yeah.
When you go to the gym, you have a great workout, you do something you haven't done, you feel terrific. I know I do personal training today. I've been doing it for quite a while now, many years, and I have like 60-some clients. And they're older folks,
Yeah.
you know, people in their 60s, 70s, that are just trying to keep some strength, keep their mobility, feel a little better, look a little better. And I tell them, when you walk back to the car after we're done here, don't you feel good? Oh yeah, I feel better. You can't measure feel better.
Yeah.
I can measure your weight loss, or your VO2 max, or your resting heart rate, or your cholesterol level, or whatever it is, but that feel better, I can't measure. And that's the reason to do this. You just feel better with regular exercise. And fortunately, weight training today is mainstream, like especially for young people, but even for older people too. You know, people are now accepting the fact. You know, I worked for Orthopedic One for 6-7 years as their fitness director, so I would take care of patients after physical therapy that needed to start a fitness program so that their knee replacement has a better outcome. You know, I would deal with overweight, obese people all the time. 300, 400-pound people was a regular thing for me.
Yeah.
And they would wonder, why does my knee still hurt? My back still hurts. Well, you can't carry that weight on your skeleton. So I would try to get involved in a fitness program to change their lifestyle.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would share a story about myself where I started, as I told you a while ago, when I first got into this, and tell them, that as long as you get better, don't compare yourself to other people.
Yeah.
As long as you get better, that's all that matters, and just let it take you wherever it's going to go. Because people do get better, and then they get into something else, which they never even thought they could do, because they never took the time to do what they were supposed to do first. You know, it's just a choice.
Yeah.
If you're going to exercise, there's no excuses. It's just choices and consequences.
This might be a strange question. What's it like to grow older while weight training? Like compared to the younger Garry to the Garry now?
You know, I have my training partner, Jeff, he's 67. I have another training partner, Don, he's 75. He can raw bench 3 1/4 at 181. He's 75.
Yeah.
And I train him, and I have to remember, He's 75 years old, okay, when I'm having him do things. And we've all had procedures done, all of us, all three of us. And sometimes we'll go, gosh, like today I squatted 410 for 5, and I remember when I did 615 for 5. Well, that was 30 years ago, And it's just the body, as you get older, everything gets harder, everything. And that's what's nice about the Masters competition. That's what's kept me going. If there wasn't such a thing with Master competition and records, I don't think I'd still be going. I know I wouldn't be going at this level. It just gives me a reason to drive myself, to challenge myself. Yeah. But you have to learn how to be humbled, because you can't do what you used to do. Nobody can. Yeah. Nobody can do what they did when they were 20, 30, or 40 years old, those prime years. Like I said, I'll be 68 in a couple months, and I'm still pretty strong, but not like I was, and nor is anybody else, And you just have to humble yourself and go, okay, I got to stay fit here. It's good for my health, big picture, right? I want to wake up tomorrow. I like to lift into my 70s. It's kind of a fun thing to think about. So that's the main thing, is you just have to humble yourself and realize you can't do the things you used to do. You can do a lot of things, but you have to adapt.
In your head, are you still young?
Yeah.
Has weight training helped with that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because, I know I can do things that nobody else can do for my age. I know what people are doing or not doing. I could take a long yellow tablet, and I could write 100 names of guys I've trained with since day one. 100. Yeah. They're gone. Come and gone. Yeah. I'm still standing, trying. Yeah. Well, I'm trying.
I remember, and I said that to you before we got started, as Lou was like, there's Garry Benford. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, fucker's still going. And he's like, Tom, the biggest test of time. He's outlasted me. He's still doing competitions. And he goes, gotta give him credit.
It's like getting anointed. Yeah. For me.
Well, I mean, I've said this in multiple podcasts, but when you're around Louie, where you stand with, if he ends up, well, that's Garry. With Jimmy Seisel, that's just Jimmy. Like, once you're in the ecosystem and he's mentioning your name, you're part of a special time in his life. He wasn't the most outwardly emotionally intelligent person to show you stuff, but internally, you knew Lou, you knew everything that what meant to him.
We all did.
And I know we're running short on time, and I'd love to get you on again because I've got so many more questions that are coming up now. But we like to wrap this up with what are you most proud of with your time with Louie and Westside Barbell?
The fact that I got my elite status, that was always a goal. It took me 17 years. That's a long time to shoot for a goal. I started in 73, I got it in 90. And without him, I never would have happened. And there's how many elites have been here? 100? I don't know. It's just
110.
Yeah, something like that. I've been in a little over 100 meets myself in my life, But when I got my elite status and he presented me with that sword, it was like the queen anointing me, making me sir or something, having you stand out, Doug and I, to do that. And, I've won a world championships, I've won national meets, I've set world records, not anything like that. Because it was from him.
Yeah. Garry, I truly appreciate the time, and I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thank you so much. I appreciate you inviting me here today.
Thank you.